Hi, everybody. How are you doing? Today, we're going to cover our very last lesson of our textbook, and this is the lesson on working with transparency. So, guess what? After today, no more lecture videos. All right, let's go ahead and get started. I went ahead and opened up the lesson 12 start file. It's 12 underscore start. I am going to resave this. And this will be resaved as 12 underscore menu. Can you believe we finally made it to the last lecture video? Wow, it's always exciting. Okay, so in this lesson, we learn how to apply transparency and effects to graphics. So looking at the start file, okay, 12 underscore menu, it doesn't look like there's a lot going on the screen compared to other start files. But if we take a look at the pages panel, our page 1 is currently blank, but it won't be for very long. And then page 2, we aren't even going to be touching it in this lesson. So we're just going to be focusing primarily on page 1. Now, the thing with this particular lesson is that we do rely very heavily on the layers panel. Okay, I know that we've talked about the layers panel in past lessons, and I spoke to you guys about, I think it was in the lesson on working with objects, maybe. With the layers panel, we talked about the current drawing layer. We talked about how if you accidentally created or placed something on the wrong layer, how you could move this from one layer to another using the little square. And we could select that and then just do a drag and drop. We talked about how we could view layers and lock layers and all of that. So 12 underscore menu is actually coming in with quite a bit of layers already created for us. And each of these layers have a lot of different objects on them. And remember from those earlier lessons that this is the stacking order of each layer. And then all of the layers have their stacking order. So there's a lot that we're actually going to be working with. Okay, even though it doesn't look like it right now, in just a few minutes, you're going to start to see the white background is going to be filled, and we're going to be turning layers on and unlocking them and working with them and learning how to apply transparency and different effects to the objects that we're going to be working with. When we are completely done with this lesson, this is what page 1 is going to look like. Okay, so we're going from pretty much a blank document on this page to completely designed, a great page layout, everything formatted with all kinds of different effects, blending modes, and such. So on this lesson, I'm only going to be working bits and pieces of it. So you definitely got to make sure that you are starting at the beginning of this lesson, reading and working those steps, and then just pausing the video if you're having to, working part of that along with me, because I'm probably going to be working half or less of this. And the reason for that is because, you know, working with layer effects, or object effects and transparency and stuff like that. After you kind of understand how to do that, it's so very simple. Changing blending modes, adding, outer glows, inner glows, drop shadows, bevel and emboss and stuff like that. It's just very easy to work with. Okay, so I'm going to show you guys the highlights of this lesson, and then I'm going to allow you guys to just read and just work through that and get this completed. So let's go ahead and get started with this. Now, when you do open 12 underscore start, remember that you can go ahead and update those modified links. Just make sure you guys, once you get that open, you get that resaved as 12 underscore menu. Creating a background graphic. By applying transparency effects or opacity, we can create see-through objects that reveal any objects underneath. You can insert grayscale images saved as PSD, which are Photoshop files, TIFF files, which is what we're going to insert today, bitmapped, or even JPEGs. And then you can colorize them in InDesign. When you select the graphic within the graphics frame, and then apply the color is applied to the gray portions of the image. Okay, so again, coming back into this layers panel, we've got all kinds of layers here that's got objects on them, and we will be working with them here shortly. But right now, we want to make sure that our background layer is selected. There's nothing on it. If we expand it, it's completely empty. But this is where we're going to start, and we're actually going to come in and place a file, and then we're going to actually apply some color to it. It is a grayscale image. So with the background selected, I'm going to go to File and Place. And in our Chapter 12 Lesson Files folder, there is a file. You can see it's a TIFF file. It's 12 underscore background. Now we're going to get the loaded graphics icon. Okay, and so basically we're going to come up here to the top where the bleed guides meet in the upper left-hand corner, and we're just going to click one time. You can see that now we have the light blue bounding box, the frame around this image, and it does obviously match the layer color of the background. And the swatches panel, of course, we have a lot of the same color swatches we have been working with through this entire book. And we are going to apply the green bright medium. Once we apply it, they do want us to adjust the tint of it, which is great because right now it's pretty dark. And we're going to go ahead and take that tint down. Move this down. All right. Now with the selection tool selected, I'm going to hover over the middle of the graphic. Okay. Normally you should see the content grabber in here. It's been kind of, I don't want to say disappearing, but I've noticed especially whenever I'm trying to video, my content grabber doesn't always want to show up. All right, so here's something that you can do if you were to have that problem and you have your selection tool selected and you have clicked on the image. You want to make sure you're clicking on the image. You'll have a brown frame around the image. Okay, if you don't see your content grabber, you can actually see the hand tool though, and that's indicative that you're going in the right direction. All right, so if you don't see that content grabber, if you do, click it. If you don't, that's all right. Hover in the middle of that image and you can kind of see that hand, the cursor changed to a hand icon. I went ahead and clicked, okay, and you can see that there's the brown bounding box here. All right, then I'm going to go over to my swatches and apply the green medium swatch. And then I'm going to reduce the tint even further. Okay, so you can kind of see here that it matches. Okay, I've noticed, especially when I'm using my on-screen video recording, that I sometimes don't get that content grabber. Okay, you probably won't have that problem, but I'm just letting you know that if you do, just hover over as long as you see that you have the brown frame around your image. That's letting you know that you have the image selected, which is correct. And then just hover in the middle and your cursor should change to a hand. Then go ahead and go to your swatches panel and select that. Okay, the grayscale parts have now turned that light green color. So now what I need to do is come over into my layers panel and then just go ahead and lock that background because we're going to be turning a lot of layers on and off and we don't want our background to move out of position. Applying transparency settings. Transparency features include blending modes, drop shadows, feathering, glowing edges, bevel, and emboss. These all help to create special visual effects. The effects panel is what we use to specify the opacity and blending modes, apply a transparency effect, etc. Now, when you get over to this section in the text, at the end of that section, there is a page here that's called Effects Panel Overview. Make sure you guys read through that. In the Layers panel, I need to show my Art1 layer and unlock it. Okay, obviously you have to unlock a layer before you can select anything on it. Now I'm going to be using my selection tool. I'm going to click the full circle that contains the red dark color in the center of the page. And if your effects window is not currently docked at the right hand side in all of those collapsed panels, you can totally go and open that. It would be under Windows and Effects. Okay, once you open it once, it should be docked. So with this red dark color, this circle here in the middle selected with the selection tool, you can open your effects, and they're going to have us change the opacity a lot to a lot of these different objects. We're going to change this one to 70%. And then I'm going to, and you can almost see bringing the opacity down makes it a little bit more see-through. So you can actually see a little bit more of the background coming through the left side of that circle. All right, I'm going to select the bright blue semicircle that's up here in the upper left corner, and I'm going to change its opacity to 50%. You can use the slider or you can just type that in. Now I'm going to select the full circle that has the green medium in the lower left corner, and I'm going to change its opacity to 60%. Okay, and with the selection tool, I'm going to go back and select the red dark circle in the middle of the page. And using the effects panel, I want to change the overlay from the blending mode menu. So here's the blending mode menu right here. And right now it says normal, and then I want to choose overlay. And look at the difference in color that we have just by changing a blending mode. So blending modes basically interact with pixels of one layer with pixels of the other layer, okay, underneath of it. I'm going to go and select the bright blue semicircle that's back up here in the upper left corner. And then I need to change my blending mode here to multiply. Okay, so that actually darkened it. It doesn't even look like it's blue anymore. Adding transparency effects to imported vector and bitmap graphics. You can also apply opacity and blending modes to imported graphics that were created in other apps like Illustrator and Photoshop. I need to go back to my layers panel, and I need to select my Art2 layer. So I need to unlock it, and I need to make that visible. With my selection tool, I'm going to select the graphics frame that actually contains this black spiral, but then this is the one on the left side. But then I need to hold my shift key down, and then I need to click the graphics frame that actually has the other black spiral that's on the right side. Okay, so I need to make sure that I get both of them. And then from the blending mode, I'm going to go back to my effects panel. I'm going to choose dodge this time, color dodge. And then I'm going to change its opacity down to 30%. Okay, so it kind of blends in even better. Still with my selection tool, I'm going to select the circular graphics frame that has this, looks like salad here. Okay, now you got to make sure when you select it, it has the green frame. Okay, because we're actually changing the frame, not the graphic, we're changing the graphics frame. All right, in the effects panel, okay, you have to make sure you're in the right spot here. Okay, it says to click the stroke that's underneath the object. So it's here's the object. You want to make sure that you have the stroke. And from its blending mode, you want to make sure that you choose hard light. Isn't that a cool effect? Yeah, I thought that was pretty neat. Importing and adjusting Illustrator files that use transparency. When an Adobe Illustrator, which is an AI file, is imported into InDesign, any transparency settings that were applied in Illustrator are going to be recognized and preserved. You can also add additional transparency, adjust opacity, and add a blending mode to it. You can also add transparency settings to text. So now I'm going to go back to my layers over here, and I need to unlock and show Art 3. And then I'm also going to unlock and show my type layers. All right, so with my selection tool, I'm going to come down here and select the small text frame that has Urban Oasis Gardens. And in the effects panel, I need to make sure that this time I have text selected. I'm going to choose overlay from its blending mode and change the opacity down to 70%. And then I'm going to click the text frame that contains the breakfast, lunch, dinner, events, and catering. And in the effects panel, this one, I want to make sure I have fill selected. And then I'll change its opacity to 70%. So when you're working with this, it seems easy, and truthfully, it really is. You just need to make sure you have object, stroke, fill, or text selected. And then before you come and start adjusting the blending mode or the opacity. Okay, so that's a little bit different than how it would operate in Photoshop. When you get to the end of this section on importing and adjusting Illustrator files, make sure you guys read that small section there on transparency effects. Applying a basic feather to the edges of an image. Feathering creates a subtle transition from opaque to transparent around the edge of an object so that any underlying object or the page's background is visible through that feathered area. Okay, y'all, there are 3 types of feathering that are included in our text. There is basic feather, softens or fades the edges of an object over a distance that you would specify. Directional feather softens the edges of an object by fading the edges to transparent from a direction that you would specify. Then there is gradient feather, and that softens the area of an object by fading them to transparent. All right, so let's go back to our layers panel. Now, my layer for Art 1 is unlocked and it is visible, which is good. So with my selection tool, I want to come over here and select the purple warm filled circle that's in the upper right side of the page, okay? So you can see this one right here. And then I'm going to go to Object, Effects, and Basic Feather. And when this opens, we want to change these values in here. So the feather width, we want this to be 0.3125 inches. The choke and noise values, we want those to be 10%. It's going to change the look of it quite a bit. And then I'm going to go ahead and click OK. So now this kind of has a really cool effect to it now. Okay, and it's basically has been feathered from the edge this way. You can see that. All right, so I'll totally let you guys finish working this. All right, adding a drop shadow to text. A drop shadow results in a 3D effect that makes the object appear to float above the page and cast a shadow on the page and the objects below. So we have actually quite a bit of work to do still on this page, but I did want to show you guys about the drop shadow real quick. So this text that contains editable blossoms, okay, I'm going to open up my effects panel and we can add an additional effect this way. Okay, there is an FX button, just like what we're probably, if you've had Photoshop, we have that FX button as well in the layers panel to add a layer effect. So same, same concept here. So the FX is adding a layer effect, or in this case, it would be like an object or a text effect or stroke effect or whatever. And I do want to choose drop shadow. So when the effects dialog box opens, we want to make sure that opacity is set at 85%. The X and Y offset needs to be 0.06. Probably just going to have to type that in. 0.06. Oops. Got to go back in there. Don't hit enter till you're done. Okay, I need to go back in here and select. So both X and Y offset is 0.06. And then the size, 0.125. So all I had to do was on my options, click the arrow up button one time. And then the spread on this is going to be 5%. And then you can click OK or hit enter. Okay. I can see it. You probably can't see it as well because we haven't worked with this box yet. Okay, but you will. But there is a drop shadow that you can barely see it because it's still dark. Okay. But the drop shadow is running on this side. Okay, you can kind of go through and see it a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and do a control S on that and save what I've got so far. All right, so as we near the end of the lesson, obviously there is still quite a bit of work to do. Not much, but I mean, you still probably got at least half to do. But as you near the end of the lesson, there is a couple of things that I wanted to point out for you guys to read: transparency settings and options, and when not to use transparency. All right, so I wanted to take a look again at the end file because as you've noticed, everything that we have done so far in this lesson is making sure your selection tool is selected, your layers in the layers panel are unlocked, and the visibility is toggled on so that you can see it. And then we are using the effects panel to change opacity and blending mode, in addition to adding a few additional effects to whatever it is we have selected: the text, the object, the fill, the stroke, whatever. So that is basically the whole gist of this lesson. Okay, so just showing you a lot of the highlights of what you're going to be doing as you read and work these steps. You can kind of get a feel for that. So as I mentioned, obviously I didn't nowhere near finish this, but I was able to show you guys how you're going to adjust blending modes and opacity on all of those objects: text, fill, stroke, and such. So if we take a look, this is what I have just done so far. There is, I think it's an Adobe Illustrator file that you guys are going to bring in that's going to be on top of this graphic over here. I didn't insert that. Obviously, it's very easy to place, but this is what this is going to look like when it's done. So having this on a different background, which you guys are going to change, you'll really be able to see the drop shadow that I had just added and showed you guys how to go about doing that. The drop shadow is obviously a lot more apparent. So this black kind of like starburst look, you guys will be changing this. Okay, and this is what this will look like when it's done. And then the Adobe, I think it's an Adobe Illustrator graphic you guys are going to add, and then work with the effects in blending mode and stuff with this. Okay, that's what I did not add, was this right here. So obviously this needs to be changed. The color of the background right here needs to be changed. And the graphic, I left that off. And that's probably, other than a few little minor things to wrap it up, that is pretty much everything. So it's a very easy chapter. You just want to make sure that you have the right things selected before you go about changing opacity, blending modes, and stuff like that. In addition, just pay close attention when you are reading the book when they have you select a graphics frame. The graphics frame, for instance, will be the color of the layer that it is on. Okay. If you have to select the image that sits in that frame, remember that that image frame box itself will be a light brown color. Okay. I think that will help you greatly to remember those two things as you move and work through this lesson. All right, be very excited. This is the last one. Okay, so make sure that you guys get this submitted. Please, if you have any questions about this lesson or about anything else up through this point, please make sure you get with me about that because starting next week, we won't have any more lectures, okay, because this is wrapping up the book for us. And then we will start with the very first portfolio project, and I will cover that in its entirety with you on Blackboard and in Zoom. And I'll do a screen share in Zoom, and then that way I'll be able to show you guys lots of student examples. We'll talk about all of the project details, and we'll move on with those projects that you guys will have as part of our InDesign class. Thank you guys. I hope you enjoyed the lecture videos, and I hope that you have found them very helpful. Have a great day.